Welcome to another episode of the Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast, the show that brings you weekly advice and news at the beginning of every weekend. Introducing first your co-hosts Mac, Mark, Scott, and Landon. Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast. This is episode 60, and a big one here, our 1-year anniversary, going over our biggest hits and misses over the last year. Got my whole crew with me, wherever you guys are, however you may be listening. We all want to thank you for making us a part of your day. We're into July. It's July 6th. And we're ready to rock. So, boys, how's the week been? Are you guys looking forward to this as much as I am?
Yeah, I can't wait. Mac, there's zero chance we got anything wrong ever. Right?
Well, the only thing we got wrong was adding these two monkeys to our podcast.
There you go.
Based on Scotty and Mark joined us midway through the year. Mark before Scott. Glad that they're here with us. Hopefully they can balance out our horrendous takes, because the next 45 minutes is going to be like a Bash, Landon, and Mackenzie show.
Well, you know what? After listening to a couple episodes, I got to say there's some hot takes in there, and some things said that should not be on the internet, and I've never said that before in my life.
Oh, jeez. Some flaming hot trash.
Well, while I was digging in some of the crates here, I'm glad that I didn't have to hear my own voice, because I still I'm not that comfortable hearing myself recorded. And also, I make terrible takes. So there's like two really good reasons not listen to my old episodes. But yeah, you guys, I mean, for when you were holding it down, just you two, it's like times were simpler, you know? I feel like...
But Marky, that's why you fit in so well here with us.
Aw.
Not so much you, though, Scott.
Yeah.
You know what? I take that as a compliment, so thank you. You made my night.
Well, we're going to kick things off here by mentioning that we are on Instagram and Twitter at SMS_fantasy. We had just changed the Instagram handle to make things a little bit easier for you guys. So you can get us same handle, both platforms. You can get the guys individually on their Twitters. Episode description will have the link, so you can just follow those to their individual Twitter. So if you want to roast, Landon for some of his bad takes, feel free to do so.
Please do. I encourage it.
But we're going to kick things off with a little bit of a debate between Landon and Scott. I think there's some money riding on this one, and Scott just wrote a nice article that we put up on our Patreon, basically saying that Delaney Walker of the Titans is a forgotten tight end one in fantasy football. It's a pretty solid article. I think he makes a really good case for Delaney Walker, and I'm not going to steal any of his points, but basically Mark and I are just going to kind of sit back, let these two go at it, and then we'll come in to sort of give our 2 cents and then we'll move on. But first, tell everybody what is riding on this little bit of a bet you guys have.
Scott?
Well, this particular debate is one that Landon and I have been having for what feels like the better part of 6 months. So it got to the point where we basically said, put up or shut up. We added it to the board, $20 to the winner at the end of the season. Whoever scores the most points, Landon, everybody knows that I am selecting the tight end of the year, in my opinion. Comeback kid Delaney Walker. And Landon, who is your champion?
Scott, you gave me the opportunity to really pick anyone I wanted around his ADP. But that's just not fair. I don't need a wide receiver or a running back to finish ahead of Delaney Walker. So I picked a tight end going a round and a half later, named Jack Doyle. Ooh. This should have been an easy one for you to win, but I don't think it's going to be even close.
Interesting. All right. Well, as I've put out the article and I have my points to go on, I want to hear why you decided to go with Jack Doyle over what is clearly, based on history, a game changer of a tight end in Delaney Walker.
Well, if we were basing this on history, fantasy football would be a very predictable thing to
100%.
predict. However, well, easy for me to say, right? But as we know, it's very not. And the one thing we do know is that Father Time always wins. And I went with an old tight end, but I went with a tight end in an electric offense with a quarterback that could be the number one quarterback in the NFL. He's definitely one of the best, and with Jack Doyle, he's a move tight end. He always has been. He's not that red zone guy, and what I can rely on are yards with Jack Doyle. There's no reason why he won't be a go-to guy between the 20s and then get a couple touchdowns in. I'm not going to rely on an Eric Ebron with touchdowns. I'm going to go for yards, and I think Jack Doyle's as reliable as they come. In the late, he's a late 12th round pick, even undrafted, and I'm still willing to put him up against your Jack Doyle love.
All right, so I hear your points there, and basically what I will refute those with is when you're at this point in the draft, I just, especially in redraft leagues, I just don't see how you can think the upside on a guy like Jack Doyle overshadows the potential plug-and-play tight end one of a Delaney Walker. If you look at Jack Doyle's stats, in his best season, 2017, he hit 690 yards and 4 touchdowns. I'll say that.
How many targets did he have?
80. Or 80?
Okay.
No, he had 80 receptions. So I'll give him that. That was, that's a fine season. It's a good season. That is his best season to this point. The drop-off around that is, pretty substantial. 2016, 584 yards, 5 touchdowns. It's a fine stat line. It's not a great stat line. I know you don't want to say that history is all we look at, but the even immediate history of Delaney Walker is that of a potential, championship winning team. 74 receptions, 807 yards, 65 receptions, 807 touchdowns, 94 receptions, almost 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns. Like, the list goes on, but what I'm saying is he got hurt in week 1, in the middle of the game, week 1. Ever since then, he's been rehabbing and getting ready. This isn't like, a lingering off and on injury. It was a freak, broken leg, but he's now back. He's hungry, and we all know he has proven when he's in the game, he's a target hog, and they love going to him. So, in my opinion, if you're going to take the risk, go for the home run swing. Go for the guy that if he hits, you now have a tight end one, and all you've given up is a late round pick. I think with Eric Ebron coming off a Pro Bowl season in Indy, going with somebody like Jack Doyle, the best you can probably hope for is him going back to 2017 form because he has a lot of competition there. He's even got a young tight end behind him who last season got a bunch of reps. Tennessee really has nothing else in the tight end department, so that's my case for Delaney Walker. I think for the guys who take him and take that risk, you could end up with one of the top 5 tight ends in the league, and I just don't think you can sit there and say the same about Jack Doyle.
See, I think the upside you speak of is so very limited with Delaney Walker. He's in a run-first offense with a bad quarterback. The volume is just not there. Marcus Mariota only threw the ball 303 times last year. And they won some football games with Derrick Henry down the stretch, and they're going to keep that mentality going. If they were confident in their pass catchers, they wouldn't have drafted a wide receiver. Jonnu Smith still has upside. I think he's a guy that will come in and replace Delaney Walker. He's a 35-year-old tight end that's been off for a year. He's not going to come in there and just pick up where he left off. I think it's a waste of a pick in the late round when you're going off an old broken tight end that, maybe has some touchdown upside, but that's so unpredictable. Like, he's not a guy to move the ball and be that target hog anymore. He's a potential Hall of Fame tight end, but that's not a guy that I want as like a boom bust upside at the end of my draft. Not even close.
And I will say,
all right, I'm gonna jump in right here. Jump in because we're going on long enough. I think you guys made some great points. I will give my 2 cents on Delaney Walker, and then I've got a little bit of a curveball coming at the both of you. So what I'll say about Delaney Walker, I will disagree with Scott that he is a plug and play option. I think he's the exact opposite. I think he's a very stream worthy tight end, but you're paying 11th, 12th round capital for him. He's going to be a guy that you can afford to drop if things don't go the way that you plan, Scott. So I think that he might be worth a late round pickup as your second tight end, and you stream him where it is, or you let him go to the waiver wire and you sort of keep your eye on him throughout the season. And if he hits, you spend some fab. That's the way I see Delaney Walker. I don't see him as this, elite level option. It's been there in the past, coming back from injury, 35 years old. It's a tough ask. It really is. The proposition I have for the both of you, can I jump in on this bet taking Austin Hooper, who is going 2 rounds in ADP later at the 1307 right now in half-point leagues? Can I take Austin Hooper of the Atlanta Falcons in this, make it a 3-way tight end bet?
Ooh, I say the
like
more the
Austin
merrier.
I almost picked Austin Hooper for this bet, but I decided to go with Jack Doyle. But sure, why not? We'll bring you in on this bet.
Slap it down, boys.
I love
Austin
Hooper.
Hooper last year. Yeah, Austin Hooper last year was the tight end 7. He finds himself in an Atlanta offense that is 5th in attempts, 617. So the Atlanta Falcons like to throw it. I think there's plenty to go around, and I would take Austin Hooper over both of these guys at a bigger value than Delaney Walker.
Marky, one quick question: do you take Delaney Walker in the 11th round in your fantasy drafts? Yes or no?
In the 11th round, I would not take Delaney Walker.
Hey, there we go.
But it is a question of his age and the fact that his last season is unspoken for. You're right that he's not just going to come right back in and take up where he left off. I think they've probably been working a lot harder to get Jonnu Smith in that role for him, as he will be like an imminent successor. I don't put a lot of faith into these guys that are so close to the end of their season that they're riding it out. So Scott, sorry, buddy, but I just I think Delaney Walker is going to be. Well, he's not going to be on my teams this year, but I think he's to me, the Tennessee Titans do not have enough action going for them in their passing game because I don't trust Marcus Mariota, and he's going to throw the ball even less if the coach speak that's come out in the offseason is correct. It's going to be a running team.
Mackie, let's talk to the listeners about our listener league.
Yeah, absolutely. Just one thing real quick. Scott, this is your first moment where a year from now we'll look back and either talk about this moment where you can give out 3 fingers or you can cower and, hide, but we will find you. So this is the first time you get to live on your own hill. So congratulations.
I love it.
I love that you're all up against me, and it will feel so great when this comes through.
It always does.
So we're running a listener league for the podcast on Sleeper, and right now we've got us 4 and I guess another 5. So congratulations to Eric Zubert, Easy Daddy 79 on Twitter, who's won the the 9th spot. We've got 3 more spots to fill. We've had some really great response. We have about 20 guys right now in the running that we're going to discuss and go over. So next Friday, keep your eyes open. We will post the next entrant into the league, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I really hope this league is competitive. With all of the applications that we've had so far, it seems like the response is really good. The enthusiasm's high, and that's exactly what we want for guys that are listening. So that's pretty much all I have to say about that. So if you haven't gone ahead and given us your pitch,
your application
go ahead,
package
shoot us
with a photo included.
Of course,
Full credit
$20
report
is always. Yep. Yeah, go ahead, shoot us a comment, a tweet, get into the DMs, any way that you want to get a hold of us, go ahead and do so, and make your best case. But we're going to hop into the fun stuff here. We are digging through the archives and picking out the biggest hits, biggest misses over the last year. So it's going to be, I want the good, the bad, and the very ugly for the next half hour. So stay tuned and enjoy. Okay, I'm going to kick things off. I recapped our second episode. And in our second episode, it was just Landon and I. We had just come back from Long Island, New York, watching the U.S. Open. And we decided, you know what? We're going to go and pick some breakout candidates for 2018. And we're going to discuss the hype of the Giants, who basically just drafted Saquon Barkley. And people were saying, oh, this team's going to be so good. And some of the takeaways that we had from the first conversation was Landon and I kind of hit this one out of the park. There was a lot of speak at the time saying that, with Saquon Barkley there, having such a big workload and having Odell back and healthy, that Eli Manning could lead this team to the playoffs, but also could be very fantasy relevant. And we sort of said that if Saquon, OBJ, and Evan Ingram all had, top finishes at their position, so meaning they were QB1, wide receiver 1, tight end 1, Eli Manning still wouldn't be close to being a quarterback 1, and that certainly wasn't the case. Last year, just going through the rankings, Eli Manning finished as quarterback 16. So outside the top 12, so we kind of nailed that one down. So I thought that was pretty solid. We went to the breakouts, and this was really the tale of two stories here. Landon went out on a limb and went after two rookies and said that he projected Darius Geis to be a workhorse, have over 260 carries, and have a great year. And obviously injury plagued that take from even getting any sort of legs. Darius Geis was injured. What did he tear? His ACL or MCL? It was his knee in the first or the third week of preseason. So that, I don't think that's a big miss on your part. I think that's just unfortunate. You also came out and said that Rashad Penny would be an absolute stud. You said he averaged 7.8 yards per carry, one of the highest college dominator ratings. He'll continue that level of production in the NFL. Seattle spent draft capital on Penny, and they're going to use him to the best of their ability.
Who would ever think that?
That was a swing and a miss.
King of the penny stocks.
The penny stock was broke. No, it was a good limb to go out on. I think a lot of people are buying into that narrative going into 2019. They think maybe I was a year off, like you always say. Maybe I was a year off on this player, and
I love that.
I certainly don't think that it's out of the possibilities for him to grab that job. But yeah, people are still buying into the same narrative. So yeah, you might have just been a year off. Like, who knows? In the same episode, I went out and said that former first-round pick ahead of Aaron Rodgers, Alex Smith, was passed on by the Chiefs, and they are basically putting their franchise on the line with sophomore quarterback Pat Mahomes. And I said that Pat Mahomes is walking into a great offense with a lot of weapons, and he has an absolute cannon for an arm. I think I said rocket. And I said that I project him to be a lock for a top 10. His current ADP at the time was 11.4. So fourth pick of the 11th round. I said he'd be a great draft pick. Landon basically said, you're crazy to say that this sophomore player is going to be top 10. And, I was a little bit off on my projection of top 10. He was the number one quarterback by about 70 points. But that one came crazy true. And then I also said that Juju Smith-Schuster would continue to break out. You said, didn't he already break out? And I said, yeah, he did. He only had 80 targets last year. That put him 55th in the league at the time. I said that his target share will rise. Big Ben will start to trust him. He will be a very integral piece of the offense. He went from He went from 80 targets in 2017 to 166 targets in 2018. So that projection for Juju was spot on. So it was kind of a funny episode. I was really hoping that I would be the one to flop there because I just wanted to, make fun of myself, trash myself a little bit, which I'm sure you guys will do, and I'm looking forward to.
There's plenty of time for that. Yeah.
It just so happened that I got lucky in that episode and Landon fell flat on his face. So.
I went out on a limb a little bit here, all right? I didn't go Juju Smith-Schuster.
You did. I mean, it was a little bit risky at the time. I mean, we're talking about a sophomore player who the typical narrative is, sophomore slump. We said the same thing with Dak Prescott, and I basically said, no, in an offense with Antonio Brown, this guy is going to be a stud, and certainly was. So it wasn't as much of a limb as going for 2 rookies, but it wasn't a bad take.
I went to episode number 6. We did our bold predictions, and it was actually right after.
How bold are we talking here?
Well, so this was the episode, that you did by yourself, right?
Oh,
so
God.
I was gone. I was gone to camp, and you were doing some more bold predictions, and we did lots of those, and we will do plenty this off season as well.
That was the longest 50 minutes of my life.
That was a heavy one there, Mac. But
that was brutal.
You did pretty good, and it's amazing how far the podcast has actually come since that time. So
agreed.
I'll try to keep it short and sweet, but you predicted the Indianapolis Colts to have only 4 wins.
Nice.
You predicted the Jaguars to win that division. So a little bit, you flip-flop on that. But, you also, bold prediction, you had Deshaun Watson not finishing as a quarterback 1. And you had Sammy Watkins finishing ahead of Tyreek Hill in fantasy points.
No. No. He wasn't ready.
Oh boy.
So your love for Sammy was a little bit heavy. It's probably pretty good this year, but it was fun to hear where what shade the shade we threw on players and where we liked them, but. It was a fun episode. You did a good job for what you had, but I'll talk about our recap of week 1 a little bit later on.
Really, really tough for Sammy Watkins to finish ahead of Tyreek Hill when Tyreek Hill finished number 1.
Yeah.
Really hard.
All right, who's next? Who's got Mark? You've got episode 11.
That's right. Episode 11. This is, I'd probably been listening for, this is probably like the 3rd or 4th episode I had heard. Big fan, still am. But yeah, it was kind of fun digging in the crates here. I saw like the NFC East and South predictions on this episode, and those are 2 divisions that just they've been exciting to me. My team is kind of in there, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and you guys did touch on them as well as the NFC East, who has some teams that they're always fun to talk about. And last year there were some big question marks and big shifts. But just to talk about a few things that kind of grabbed my ear as a listener is this one quote from Mackenzie, whereby he said, Christian McCaffrey is not going to be that guy to run through tackles. He's not going to get 200 carries in a season. That's what CJ Anderson's for.
He doesn't even go here.
CJ.
You followed this by saying,
CJ love.
people are giving CMC way too much credit. They're making him out to be someone he's not. I picture him getting somewhere around 150 carries, 80 receptions. Now, those numbers were a little bit different in the actual season, having finished with 219 carries, about 1,100 rushing yards, 107 receptions, and 867 receiving yards. Almost went 1,000. He wants to do it this year. But, man, I don't know. It's like CJ Anderson, I think he did a little better than McCaffrey last year, if my memory serves me correct, right?
Absolutely.
He played more playoff games. No,
I don't dislike CJ Anderson too, but it's just hilarious to me how the league unfolds sometimes, right? Like,
no,
yeah, amazing.
it can be it can be so treacherous.
Actually,
it really can.
Mac and guys, I didn't actually say my bold prediction. So I actually had Kyle Rudolph as a tight end 1 last year, which obviously did not even come close to fruition. And I also had Sam Darnold leading the Jets to the playoffs last year.
Swing and a miss.
Ooh.
Swing and a miss. Both my bold predictions were off. So sorry, I didn't mean to just throw shade at you.
I'm pretty sure I said that I like the Kyle Rudolph take, but I said I don't know about that Sam Darnold one, buddy.
Yeah, sorry, pal.
So another Lil quote here from Mackenzie is that he simply doesn't believe in Julio Jones. This is his turn to fall off.
Oh, yes. I remember that.
He didn't.
No.
He didn't. But I'd be lying if that
He decided to score touchdowns.
That's true. You know, he had a rough go trying to get into that end zone for the first half of the season, but he did finish with a ton of yards, 113 receptions, 1,667 yards, and obviously he did not fall off. And we saw like just some blistering highlights from the arm of Matt Ryan last year. So yeah, I mean. Like, I guess you can't ever predict a fall off for Julio Jones because he is just a guru on that field at this point.
Look, I'm willing to return to that hill this year.
Oh, snap.
No, I'm kidding.
So I gotta
learn my lesson.
I gotta giggle out of this one too. This is a player who's on Landon's favorite team. This wasn't actually related to this division, but there was one point in this argument where Landon said, "Trade Adam Thielen right now."
Trade him. Trade him now.
If he had have said that at week 9, he would have been a goddamn genius.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And where else here? What else? Okay, so talking about the NFC South, obviously you guys had to touch on my team, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And
of course,
you talked about the dumpster fire, I believe was the term that was thrown around. Didn't appreciate that. But,
I mean,
to be fair,
you don't. Stats don't lie, my man.
To be fair, they were quite on fire by the end of the season and the middle of the season.
Well, Jameis didn't start the season, but then they came out week 1 and beat the Buccaneers, they beat the Saints 48-40.
Yeah.
And then they followed that up with a 27-21 win over the Eagles. And that's when the hilarity with Ryan Fitzpatrick in those post-game interviews started.
Fitz magic.
Oh, yeah.
But then they lost
good.
the next 3, and then they beat the Browns, and then they lost the next 4 after that. And, well, let's just say it was a dumpster fire after all. So, good take.
There you go.
Good take.
Yeah, and then everything else actually is pretty spot on. Like, I mean, the one thing is, like, we predicted absolutely, like, a dust cloud for the Dallas Cowboys passing attack, and then they ended up getting Amari Cooper halfway through the season, and we all know how that went. So,
very well.
That's tough to predict.
Unforeseeable, absolutely unforeseeable. But yeah, it was.
You're supposed to know those things, Matt. Come on.
It was a long episode.
Well, I mean.
Long app.
Yeah, I know. That was one of the biggest things now just digging through the data a year later. So much more consumption in the smaller episodes, which is, why our focus now is to keep them between 35 to 45 minutes. So that's one of the biggest things I think I've learned is shorter and sweeter is better. Which kind of brings me to episode 10, planting our flags. Essentially, we took a guy at each position, Landon and I, and said, we could go the quarterback ones and wide receiver ones of the world, but that's not really being bold. That's not really stepping out of your comfort zone and saying, this is a guy I really believe in. So we picked 4 players each that, weren't in those top conversations. So Landon went Andrew Luck, Kenyon Drake, Jarvis Landry, and Austin Safarian-Jenkins. I'll give him his biggest piece of credit was he said, I've seen Andrew Luck throw football in preseason. He looks good. I have faith in him. I think that his shoulder's going to be fine, and I'm going to put all of my chips. I'm all in on Andrew Luck this year. And Andrew Luck finished the QB5. So I think, hats off to Landon for going out on that limb. He was slightly off with Austin Safarian-Jenkins.
Hey, you loved him too. You were talking about the Jags. You liked ASJ too.
I love the talent. The guy just can't get right for football. It's a shame to see, but he's just got too much going on off the field. And if he can ever get his act together soon, he can still be very, very relevant. But, two mediocre takes in Kenyon Drake, Jarvis Landry, a home run hit with Andrew Luck, and a complete miss with ASJ. I went Matt Stafford, Carlos Hyde, Devontae Adams, and Kyle Rudolph. I said Matt Stafford with his ADP, you can get him in like the 10th, 11th round, depending on your league, and he's been a top 10 quarterback the last 3 seasons. He finished as a QB 19 last year, so that was a miss for me.
Swing and a miss.
Carlos Hyde was an interesting pick. I really did believe in him as the starting running back for the Browns, and basically he got traded. I think it was after week 4. So really, we only got to see 4 weeks of production from him. I'm just curious as to where he falls if you look at him last year. So let's just take a look. Weeks 1 through 4, Carlos Hyde, running back position. He was the running back 8. So tough to say. My projection was based on him being the starter for the Browns. Obviously, that changed. So I don't feel like it was a bad pick. My home run pick was Devontae Adams. He finished as the wide receiver 1 in fantasy. So glad I planted my flag there on one of my hometown boys. And then I also jumped in on the Kyle Rudolph bandwagon, and we're on that hill dying. So I went in with Landon, and it did not work out. So, we hit a couple home runs. We struck out a couple times, but that's kind of what, planting the flags is all about. And you guys will get a taste of that this year. So I'm excited for that.
For sure. Yeah. So on episode 14, I recapped week 1, that crazy wild week 1. I forgot about that.
100%. Yeah, that was that Green Bay game.
The roller coaster of your emotions, Mac, was that Aaron Rodgers going down, Aaron Rodgers coming back in, winning that game. You're thinking Super Bowl hopes, and didn't really work out for the Packers, but that's all right.
I thought we were going to win the Super Bowl. Then I thought Rodgers is out. We're done. Hundley's coming back. FML. And then we come back, beat the Browns second half, or the Bears second half, and now I'm like, we're going to win the Super Bowl. This is unbelievable.
No, didn't work out.
Not the case.
But it was the overreaction to week 1, and we threw shade on James Conner because we always thought Lev Bell was coming back, that whole saga, and I'm glad we don't have to deal with that again. I'll tell you that for sure. And
that was exhausting.
All the love for Alex Collins, and at the end of the episode, I say I'm going to go and trade for Alex Collins, and the good thing no one would sell me him, because that would have been a terrible investment by me. And yeah, that's basically the long and short. Mac pat himself on the back saying, I told everyone to draft Isaiah Crowell. He was going to be a bell cow running back for the Jets, and because he had a big first game, and obviously that didn't happen. And he was an absolute bust as well, except for a few sprinkled in there. So yeah, it was a fun recap of week 1, and the overreaction, I guess, what everyone does after the guy on your bench goes off, or your starter takes a dump, and that kind of stuff. So it was fun to listen back to really our realization that we don't know anything in fantasy football sometimes, even though we think we do. So that's my long and short of episode 14.
Scotty,
Marky,
what do you got for us?
Scotty, yeah, tell us about your experience.
Well, I grabbed episode 24 and episode 29, which were it was a really interesting time to recap the pod. Episode 24 was titled Fantasy Tilt Fest, were concerned. And I thought that was a very accurate title for the vibe that I got to experience, because it was the end of October and that magical point in the season where everything is coming undone. And the tilts really started. Landon was tilting hard on Jordan Howard. He was.
Oh, yeah.
This was
yeah.
clearly, a guy he had supported, and I just witnessed the breaking point where he just on the air said, "You know what? I'm tilting. I'm too worried about what Tariq's doing," and you could really just see the shift. And this episode was full of tilts. Max spent a good 10 minutes going over the grief of being a Rob Gronkowski owner in his last year in the league.
So frustrating, bro.
It's not that you made a prediction that he would recover fantasy value, and you didn't, and which is good. We all know how his real world season ended, but it wasn't any type of leaps and bounds finish for their fantasy owners. Now, one pick that was spot on was, I like to call it no kidding pick, but you said it. As soon as Josh Allen went down, Mac did say, if you can get Indy's D against the Bills this week on the waiver wire, you want to snag that. Fast forward to the end of the week, 37 to 5 with 3 INTs and 2 sacks. So, offhand comment, but boy, did they deliver. So I quite enjoyed that one.
Let's go.
Now, in between a couple tips of, maybe a little too much hype over Ito Smith and how you guys thought the rest of his season was going to play out there in Atlanta with the injuries. And a few more mentions by Mac about how much Derrick Henry is a bum. What I did really enjoy was just kind of watching the disintegration of Mac. He had clearly hit a point in the season where the frustration was just starting to build and take over. Blaming the things from the schedule he faced, and reminding all that you have a good fantasy team, but just sometimes the schedule does not allow you to win. So this most certainly was a tilt.
Real quick, hold on. So Landon will recall, because he was in this league. One year, I led our league in fantasy points by over 100 points, and I missed the playoffs.
Yeah, that was awesome.
That was it was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yep.
So I would summarize.
You destroy.
I would summarize episode 24 as a real emotional shift that usually happens around the midway point of the season, when calls you were so sure of in the preseason and early on have gone catastrophically off the wall.
I like it. Marky, did you learn anything?
Did I learn anything on this episode?
Episode 22.
Well, this one was aptly titled "The Joe Mixon Apology" because
that's a good
Mackenzie
one.
delivered a Shakespearean soliloquy about this guy who had missed 2 games due to a small, needed a procedure in his knee or something. Anyways, Mac had been off the Joe Mixon train, and he had been showing out with a pretty consistent 2018 campaign for each of the games he was in. And through all that tragic music, it seems like Joe Mixon had won your heart, finally.
Yeah, and I traded for him too. So. That was the hardest moment of my short fantasy analyst career. I was like, I gotta eat my crow here and just be like, dude, I was so wrong, and I actually just traded for Joe. So I'm sorry, man. But
you know what?
I missed this one.
But you know what? I'm not nailing you to the boards right now because you were the one who admitted you were wrong. I can't go back and say you were wrong because you knew it.
I knew it. My only knock on him was that he was an inefficient runner, and he, when he went from 2.9 yards a carry to like 5, I mean, obviously it shows his talent a little bit more, but obviously that offensive line got a little bit stronger too. So I think it was just a perfect, mix there that led him to being successful, and maybe just got a little bit more comfortable in the league. But
A perfect mix-in.
Hey.
a perfect mix-in. Well done.
He's going to have a great career. I love Joe Mixon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Solid.
that was, you guys also touched on waiver wire in that episode, and you had lots of pretty, I don't know, you just saw so many of the standard names last year on that. I guess at this point in the season, it was maybe not the most promising waiver wire pickups, but a couple names that stood out were someone like Kiki QT. You guys were both quite high on him. It came down to the discussion between Traquan Smith and Kiki QT. Both of you guys are in agreement that he'd be the guy to go for. And you were also both in agreement that me dropping LaShawn McCoy was a crap decision. And
I forgot about that.
yeah, just going on the airwaves and telling me how little thought must have been going through my head and
But really,
how stupid I must feel. No,
he didn't.
Not to toot my own, not humble brag there, not to toot my own horn.
but yeah, you're right. That was a good take. Saying that I was an idiot. I am one. So
That's funny. That's hilarious.
I got a little nugget to share from Patreon Pod 7, one of our most notable and most downloaded episodes of all time. Still, it was the night that we all decided that after about 5 or 6 hours of straight drinking, that we would all get around a mic with a bag of Smart Food popcorn and do a podcast with six of our buddies. And we started off the episode, Scott, I don't know if you remember, but you were debating keepers in your auction league, your keeper league. So you said, I've got Devontae Adams, I've got Zeke, and I've got Derrick Henry, and I got to keep Zeke for $55. And it's between Adams for 30 and Derrick Henry for 33. And we talked you off the ledge. You were I'm going to do Derrick Henry. I'm going to take him. And Landon and I sort of talked you out of it. And a couple things that were said was Derrick Henry will be a bust, and Devontae Adams could be a top 5 wide receiver. And the other point was, if you take Devontae Adams, you'll have him for a value for the future years, but you'll also release Derrick Henry to somebody else, and they might pay up for him, which I know Landon said you got him in the league, so it doesn't really play to my point. But essentially, we helped you make a very, very valuable decision for your team. So, and I want to say right now, I was spot on with Derrick Henry. Just because in weeks 14 and 15, the guy scored 40% of his fantasy points.
And would have got Scott a win in the playoffs.
Right. If you started Derrick Henry for the first 13 weeks, you did not make the playoffs. So that was my biggest achievement. The thing I'm most proud of last year is I went out on a limb and said Derrick Henry's a bust. He's going to be shit for your fantasy teams, and he was until weeks 14 when you were probably in the playoffs. So,
no, gotta commend you on that.
Actually, Mac, I did see another note I had, and we were talking about the Tennessee offense, and you were spot on, and the Marcus Mariota and Corey Davis love, and you really just did say, if you believe in them, go for it. You're not going to stop someone from believing in Corey Davis, but you hadn't seen it yet, and you had to see it to believe it, to actually take him and draft him where he was going last year. And I think you were spot on. Corey Davis was extremely inconsistent for sure, and he had his shining moments where he showed out, but for the most part, he was a pretty good bust. And Mariota, obviously, we know is a terrible quarterback, can't even get balls to his tight end, so it's all good in the head there.
Scotty, give us a couple nuggets here before we wrap things up on episode 29.
There was 2 main highlights that I found in episode 29. A spot-on call, really, and got to give props on this. This episode was back on November 3rd, and Landon actually changed his tune from what he'd been saying all season and called that Le'Veon Bell would be a no-show for the remainder of the season.
There we go.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That is true. I do remember
Yeah,
that.
it was in the middle of the hype, the daily or weekly tweet storms, saying Le'Veon Bell's been spotted at a gym in Pittsburgh. It was like Kawhi watch, 2018. But in that time, at that point, Landon declared pretty much what happened. That he'd just take the money hit and he wouldn't put his body on the line and he'd go somewhere else. So got to give him props for that because we were all guessing, myself included, right down until the bitter end when you just had to keep him on the bench. And another highlight, a personal low for Mackenzie, if you will, or a personal high. A personal high, depending on your take. But after the gruesome injury to Raheem Mostert against the Raiders on Thursday Night Football, Mac declared that he had stolen our show format as he had debuted the Thursday Night Snap.
Oh no!
So I'll just end it with that one.
Insert sound effect.
Oh snap! That broken chicken wing arm is still ingrained in my memory.
Oh, it haunts.
So gross, man.
It stings the memory in a bad way.
It just looked like he had a little baby arm attached to his arm. It was just, oh, God, that gives me the goosebumps. It's like 35 degrees in Canada right now, Celsius. So 100? And man, I got the goosebumps thinking about that injury again.
I think his arm turned an extra 35 degrees.
Oh, frig. All right, so listen, a year in the books, I think that's a lot to be proud of. I think, just looking back to some of our numbers, our listenership, how many subscribers we have, things have grown at a very good rate for us. I think we're proud of what we've accomplished. Just give us some things that you've learned. I know, Scott and Mark, you've been involved in the podcast, probably about 30 to 45% of what Landon and I have. So just give us your best of what you've learned so far and sort of what you hope to happen over the next year. I'll start. I think a couple things we've learned is that if we're going to make some bold takes, we better have our statistics and our justifications for those. I think going out and saying that Sammy Watkins can outperform Tyreek Hill is obviously now, looking in hindsight, a little ridiculous. So just, do a little bit more homework and give some more valuable hot takes, ones that are educational and justified. Where I hope that we'll be, look, man, I hope that we have a bigger following. I hope that we get to interact with more people. I think doing this listener league has been awesome. We've got some really good feedback. Hopefully next year we'll have maybe 2 listener leagues or grow the league to 16 or I'm just hoping to have a little bit more fun and get involved with a little bit more of an audience. So that's what I've learned and that's where I hope to be.
Yeah, Scotty or Mark, who wants to go next?
I'll let Mark hop in there as he's the veteran of the two of us.
Yeah, what I've learned is first, just to be kind of always be reading the news, like to look up. There's just so much more that happens in like the couple days preceding the NFL, and to be more dialed in with like the Sleeper app, for example, and to just sign yourself up to get more notifications. Like it changes fantasy football for you if you're a huge fan of the league or you really schedule your day around your fantasy matchups for the week, then there's so much more to be done than like the Saturday before the games. And yeah, that's one thing that like I found over the last year. I've been really like the kind of 7 days a week mentality on a league that only really spans like a third of the year. So and where I ultimately hope that this podcast end up, I hope that we can be in a room together instead of cross province on a more frequent basis.
Yes.
And just being able to actually.
That's so funny. Landon and I just talked about this today.
Yeah, and it's just, I mean, the energy is fantastic among us here, but I just think it's a little more special when we're all actually together.
Well, maybe a little bit of a spoiler, but we are planning on. Well, I'm going to come up to Thunder Bay for maybe 3 or 4 days. Hopefully, Scott can get in on that
Scotty.
too, and maybe we can get together and film some episodes, get some stuff out on the YouTube.
Yes,
I think that would be a lot of fun.
Oh, I agree. As far as what I've learned in my relatively short time here on the pod, I think it goes with what Mackenzie was saying, and kind of goes with what I believe with fantasy football is, you want to do your research, you want to check all the, the rankings and charts and whatnot you can, but I do think at the end of the day, you also need to, pick your guys, and you have to stick with them because, I do think that there is something truly horrendous about a feeling where you go with somebody just because of rankings you found on the internet when you have a gut feeling that you should go with somebody, but you don't think you've done enough research to make that decision, so you go with a chart you find on Wednesday, and you start somebody in the Thursday night game because you think, well, I haven't done my research, I don't know, they say he's 2 spots higher, and then one goes for a dud and your guy goes off. I think what I've found is, like a lot of things in life, sometimes you just have to make your best educated guess and then trust your gut, because there's so many voices out there talking that you have to kind of stand for something or you'll fall for anything. And as far as what I'm hoping for this pod, I really am looking forward to interacting with our listeners. I've really enjoyed, people are getting more active on Twitter. We're getting some, some chirps, some compliments, depending on how they feel about some of our picks. And you know what? I love it, and I hope it just keeps ramping up. I'm looking forward to the Listener League and taking them on come September.
Awesome, guys. Yeah, this has been a ton of fun. And just to cap it all off, I've learned a lot over the past 12 months, I guess, with Mac, and we've always had some hot debate, and that's what really started this off. I think it was Jimmy Graham that was the one that really got our blood boiling to get to. We almost aren't friends anymore because of Jimmy Graham and what happened there. No, but.
Driving across Long Island, I almost said, pulled over the car, said, get out, and I'm going to drive 14 hours home by myself because I'm sick of hearing this no Jimmy Graham love narrative. And I was wrong on that one too.
Yeah. Shocker. No, it's been a ton of fun, and what I really think this podcast has a chance to be fun, and to be, hopefully people can kind of get the vibe that we're all just good friends talking football, doing what we love. And man, if one day this could be a full-time job, that's the absolute dream. But I know that's a long shot, but it's fun. I think we're doing our best to give the people some entertaining content, and obviously learning about being more accurate. But that's kind of part of it. There's so much content out there. It's about not necessarily about being so accurate and getting all our bold takes right. Obviously, it's not, but it's about producing entertaining, knowledgeable, fun podcast for everyone, and hope everyone enjoys as much as I enjoy doing it.
Wicked. Well, listen, we've already mentioned the Listener League. If you want to be a part of that, go ahead, shoot us a direct message on either Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Go ahead and leave us an email if you want to at SaturdayMorningSnap@gmail.com. However you want to get in contact with the show, go ahead and plead a case for us why you should be in the league. We're going to post the next entrant next Friday, so keep your eyes out for that. We are starting to release a little bit more and more on our Patreon. So Scott just did a great article. I did one earlier in the week on Mike Williams and his fantasy outlook for 2019. And so if you want to be a part of our Patreon, which I would love for you guys to do so, we just released our positional rankings for 2019, the first draft, and that'll be updated throughout the off season. But right now we're running our Patreon $5 per month, down from $10 until the season starts in September. So if you get it now, you can lock in at the $5 mark. That gets you all of our rankings and access to an extra podcast per week that will start in the season on waiver wire pickups, which I think could be really, really valuable to you guys. And as always, if you're liking what you're hearing, go ahead and click that subscribe button and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if you would be so inclined to do so. The feedback is really, really important to us, and I think over the next year we want to make this podcast even more entertaining, more valuable for you. So your feedback is integral to that process. So I think that's all I really got to say. Hope that you guys enjoyed looking back on the last year with us, and here's to another year.
Cheers, guys.
You're here.
All right, boys. We'll see you next week. Enjoy that beautiful weather, and as always, we'll see you next Saturday.
Have a great
Happy
weekend.
weekend, everybody.
Bye. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast. Follow us on Twitter at SMS_fantasy. Support this independent podcast at patreon.com/SaturdayMorningSnap.